Hello everyone, I'm Wendy. I'm a Future Workforce Coordinator for Health Workforce Queensland. Once again, this is an interactive discussion, so please throw your questions out there, not in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. But yeah, I'd like to start this session by just showing you a short placement video created by one of our student speakers in the room, Kate Ostwald. Kate was lucky enough to secure a placement with the Rural Flying Doctor Service in July this year. You'll note at the end of the clip that Kate mentions Going Rural helped her financially with her placement. Going Rural is a bursary offered by Health Workforce Queensland, and Meredith will speak about this when we return to the main room later. So please enjoy just while I share this clip.
When I was offered a placement with the Royal Flying Doctor Service out of Townsville, I was already initially excited. And if I could wrap up that experience in one word, I would have to say that RFTS nursing is completely addictive. The other side of RFTS placement that I found so enjoyable was the rewarding nature of it. So you're getting in the back of a plane and you're going out to all these different parts of Queensland and giving people the same quality of care that they would receive in a tertiary hospital in a metropolitan setting. And I really believe that patients are truly grateful for the work you do, because you're ensuring that just because they live a bit further out of Queensland, that they can still receive that extremely high standard of care. And I think that is one of the biggest privileges that you can have as a nurse, is to be able to give people that same level of care no matter where they call home. For my 2 weeks with RFTS, I genuinely felt like I was living in a movie. I've learned so much clinically, and I've met some of the most amazing people all over Queensland. And I'd like to say a big thank you to UQ for offering me this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. But also to Going Rural. It's a big motivator to do rural placements for this exact reason. And the financial support they've given me took a lot of stress away from me during those 2 weeks and really allowed me to fully embed myself in that placement.
All right. Yeah, it certainly looks like quite an experience there, Kate. I'm sure we'll hear more about it later when we speak to you. I hope she's made it into the room. Yes,
yeah, I made it in.
See you there. That's great. And you'll be able to answer any questions that come your way. Firstly, though, I believe Sherilyn's already introduced herself. So we just might throw to you, Sherilyn, ask you to talk a little bit about what you do and how students best navigate the administration side of rural placements.
Sure.
Universities do.
Yep. So basically, just to go through the points, as I introduced myself before and what I do, my biggest role is to advocate for students for rural placements. One of the hurdles that we do face on a day-to-day basis is universities not having that understanding that students don't want to leave the community. They don't want to leave their hometown. They don't want to leave maybe their surrounding shire. Happy to sort of travel to a neighbouring town, but for what reason, whether that be cultural issues or whether that be they might have a pet or husband or small children, they don't want to leave their hometown for long extended periods of time. So one of my roles is to advocate for rural placements for local students especially, and to also give people an opportunity that aren't from rural areas that opportunity to experience what rural life actually is and how great it actually is. As you would have seen by some of the chat that's been going on in the main room, we sometimes hear stories when we're at university about, oh, you don't want to go rural because, you know, you're not going to be accepted there, or it's too small of a town and there's nothing to do. You know what? I've lived in Roma pretty much all my life and there's heaps to do. Your problem is you've actually got to go out and look for things to do. Get yourself out into the community, drop down to the local PCYC or something like that, join the local gym, have a look, find an interest that you want, jump on Facebook and have a look around to see what sort of networking there is. That's where SQRH comes into it as well. Reach out to our clinical educators, our student support coordinators, And we'll link you in with those community things that you can do while you're on placement. So first of all, though, navigating the administration of a rural placement, what does the university do? Basically, the university is trying to find you a placement wherever they can. And that's not a bad thing, but they're not necessarily going to have on their radar that you want to go to Roma or that you really want to go to Mount Isa. Their priority is to get you a placement wherever there's availability. Our roles, Marie's role, for example, is to try and be that little key connection where we can actually go, hang on a minute, I know that student, they're a local student to the southwest or the northwest area. I do know that part of the graduate pathway, for example, for nurses, I know for Southwest Hospital and Health Service, if you haven't done a clinical placement within the Southwest Hospital and Health Service facility, doesn't matter what one, but if you haven't done one, you more than likely will not be considered for a graduate year, unless you've done a rural placement anyway. But if you've done a rural placement in Southwest, you're going to be given a higher priority. Plus, they've tried you before they buy you, basically. So they know that you're good. I've seen so many nurses over the past 4 years, for example, and allied health clinicians that have come in and they've experienced it, said the day they got here, they said, oh no, we don't want to go rural. We don't really want to go rural. They've come back here for their grad year because they loved it. And that's what we want to hear. So the point is, if you ever have any trouble finding a placement that you really, if you've got a passion to go somewhere, keep on to your university about that. Reach out to your local UDRH, whoever that may be. So if you jump online, if you search University of Department of Rural Health, it'll show you every single University Department of Rural Health in Australia. We all talk. I'm the chair of the Student Placement Coordinator Network for Australia, for Australian Rural Health Education Network. So I link in with every single one of the UDRHs, thus being how I know Marie as well. So we all talk. We know that if I've got a student that really wants to go to Longreach or Mount Isa, I reach out to Marie and I let her know who the student is. She reaches out to the university and links in with them. We all talk. That is the purpose of the UDRH. Accommodation options. Each of the UDRHs has their own accommodation. We offer subsidised accommodation. Some of it is free for our main partners. So, for example, with Southern Queensland Rural Health, our partners are University of Queensland and University of Southern Queensland, sorry. Too many to remember all the acronyms. And they are, so if we've got a domestic student from allied health, nursing, midwifery coming from either one of those partnered universities, they are given free accommodation as a domestic student. Then you've got a university like Griffith. They aren't one of our partners, but they are a part of our collaboration. So we offer a reduced price for students coming from Griffith University. They're kind of like the second cousin that we just look after a little bit. And then all other universities pay, students pay a fee for the accommodation. And we also offer bursaries, which we did offer bursaries for extended placement. So if you're undertaking a placement for any longer than 8 weeks, now that will change for next year. So it will be open for all students, no matter what education provider they are coming from. So it's not just going to be for UQ and UniSQ. They will be eligible for anyone doing an extended placement within Southwest Queensland. Barriers, not any barriers that you might come across. Number one that I can think of is accommodation. It is far and few between. The best thing I can tell you to do as soon as you have been given that confirmed placement from your education provider, jump onto your local UDRH. And if there is no UDRH accommodation available, reach out to the provider that you're going to, so the facility you're going to, and find out from them as soon as you can where the best places are to stay. They are local, they know. Sometimes the accommodation, for example, with Southwest Hospital and Health Service, some accommodation is organised as part of your placement, but don't think that if you haven't heard anything about the accommodation that you're going to automatically have accommodation, because I've had students turn up in Roma before and they've called me on a Sunday afternoon and said, where am I staying? And I don't really oversee accommodation because our student support coordinators do that. And my response was, because I happened to be on call, was, did you apply for accommodation? Their answer was no. So they have turned up for an 8-week placement and have not organised accommodation. So we had to rush around and find emergency accommodation. And luckily the Hospital and Health Service was able to help us out for a couple of nights until we could find something more permanent. But generally speaking, health services don't have accommodation really readily available. They are struggling to get staff, let alone housing students. So it is really important to make that contact. You're coming on placement to be work ready. You need to be, I guess the only word I can say is adults. You have to step up to the plate. You have to ask those questions. And without asking those questions, you're not going to know. We're not going to serve you all the answers on a silver platter. It is really important that you are stepping up and asking the questions you need to do. If you know you've got a 21st birthday party that you've got to attend and it's partway through your placement, have that conversation with the director of nursing and say, hey, do you mind if these dates, could I be rostered off because I'd like to go home for that weekend because it's my sister's 21st birthday? Most of the rural Johns would turn around and go, sure, that's not a problem. Thanks for letting me know in advance. They'll do your roster accordingly.
As long as it's greater than 24 hours, we will be very flexible, but don't expect on the day to change things.
No, that's exactly right. So the preparation, I guess, is what I'm getting to, is the key. So it's really important with that. I think that's sort of up to me. Oh, private practice placements, sorry. Southwest private practice placements, most of the private practices, they actually aren't private practices. They are owned by Southwest Hospital and Health Service. So our Charleville Health Clinic, for example, is owned by Southwest Hospital and Health Service. There are a couple of private practices around Southwest Queensland. We do facilitate placements there, but once again, that's something that's done on a case-by-case basis, and you'd need to speak to your university. Generally, the universities will either reach out directly to the private practice or they'll reach out to me, depending on what the relationship is there and if they've had placements there before. But generally speaking, across Southwest Queensland, the private practices don't take nursing placements. Only the Hospital and Health Service owned private practices take nursing students. So any questions?
No, I have one. Do students do a placement induction at all when they start their placement?
With Queensland, so there's two different types. So private practices are responsible for their own inductions of students. With Queensland Health has a deed that students may have heard of, and before they start placement, they're required to complete a number of documents. They also have to complete these documents not only for their education provider, but also for the health service they're attending. So they need to complete things like a student deed poll, which that outlines what is expected of them and how they need to be prepared for their placement. So they are the legalities forms basically in a nutshell. And then the second form they need to complete is one that is called a student orientation checklist. So it goes through things like a national police check, it goes through blue card, NDIS workers check, all those sorts of things that are mandatory for you to attend a placement at a hospital and health service. And that's across all disciplines. No matter what discipline you are required to complete both those to attend a Queensland Health facility. There's also things in there that outline, obviously, now with COVID, that your vaccinations are included and you must have your 2 mandatory vaccinations. And we recommend that you have the 3rd vaccination as well. And Southwest Hospital and Health Service do have an additional form, which is called the Southwest Pre-Placement Check, that we require to be completed, and that includes your mask fit test evidence is the main key, and your influenza vaccination, because a lot of our facilities within Southwest Hospital and Health Service are called a multi-purpose health service and have an aged care component attached to it. And under the Queensland health guidelines, aged care facilities, you must have an influenza vaccination to attend a clinical placement at that facility.
Okay. Thanks so much for that, Sherilyn. Sounds like preparation is and being organised is key to any placement that you take on. Yeah, sounds that way. Okay, so I might move on to maybe Sandy now. We haven't heard from Sandy. If you'd like to introduce yourself and then maybe give the students a bit of an idea on what a day in the life might be like for students on placement. And Christy, you're also welcome to answer this question as well.
Hello everyone, my name's Sandra. I'm the Director of Nursing here at Breakout Health Clinic and also a nurse practitioner. So Breakout is a remote Indigenous community in the Goldfield Carpentaria, and our primary health centre, we operate from Monday to Friday, 8 to 4:30, but we're also on call after hours. So we operate an ambulance service based at the centre. There's 2 nurses when we're fully staffed, but a lot of the time we're here on our own. So it'll be a single nurse here. Like I said, we operate the ambulance service and an emergency service after hours. So it could be that we work 8 till 4:30, or it could be that we work 20 hours a day and come back and back that up the next day. As far as patient presentations, I suppose it's anything from A to Z. So we've got a wide area that we cover, which is up to 3 hours away, or about 300 kilometres, and we can get some road traumas. We can get anything from station injuries. There's a lot of cattle stations around the area, and then your everyday presentations that turn up in an emergency department. We also do chronic disease management, so a big part of it is chronic disease management with our community, and we dispense here. We're not a pharmacy, but we have a little pharmacy that we dispense from here. We have a really great traditional owner, Indigenous health worker, who loves having students out here, and he typically will take students to look at crocodiles and snakes and goannas and all that kind of interesting stuff. So yeah, we have had some students open up boxes in the clinic that may have pythons inside them after working long days. Wasn't welcomed very well, but no, it's a great little clinic and a good community, and I encourage anyone to come out and have a look at these places, and I can guarantee that you will enjoy yourself.
Christy, how about a day in the life in your area?
Sure, no worries. So I kind of base mine off Charleville Hospital. So just a little bit of a background. It's got 14 beds on its general ward. It has 1 birth suite, 1 theatre, and from memory, 5 beds down an ED. So that's kind of the size that you've got. So when working as a nurse on the general ward, if you're in charge, you'll attend an interprofessional scrum in the morning. So all the doctors, nurses and allied health get together. They discuss inpatients, outpatient presentations overnight, as well as any expecs or inter-hospital transfers that come in. They then go around to the general ward, and again you'll have a doctor, an intern, the pharmacist and the senior nurse in charge to go around and see all the inpatients. We have telehealth patients also present to the hospital, so you might run into them and just point them in the right direction and say hi as you go along the corridor. If you're working on the ward in charge, you also may have the opportunity to work down an ED, especially if they're busy. So oftentimes you might have a chest pain in, you might have a paediatric presentation at the same time that might have a fracture. You might give them some intranasal pain relief prior to x-ray and just get them sorted. And then you might have a range of patients, such as like elderly patients coming in for regular wound dressings. Quite often the clinic downtown does it, but again, we're so small. If the nurse isn't working at the GP clinic, often they'll pre-arrange for patients to come up to the hospital and be seen. Other things that you might do, you might help transfer patients from ED to the ward and help out when they're busy. Later on, the paediatric patients probably confirm that they do have a fracture, so you'll also organise for them to have some procedural sedation. You'll work alongside the doctors and make sure that there's allocated staff for that to happen safely. Other things, you might actually get a lunch break, which is lovely. You'll go down to the tea room, and there you might bump into one of the community nurses and you might just have a quick chat. A big part of our role here is we complete outreach, and that can be up to 2 hours away of different sites. So you run into her and she's off to Cunnamulla the next day. She's a cardiac rehab nurse, so she's got 3 patients to review. She's got 1 new referral, which she'll actually complete a home assessment. So she'll go in, she'll have a medication review, and she'll actually assess that patient in their home. Then she might pop on a Holter monitor in the afternoon before coming back. So there's a big component of travel within many of our roles. The cardiac patient that you saw earlier in ED, you get the call that they've been admitted and that they actually need transfer to the PA for further investigation. So you pop up onto the ward because RFDS has let you know that they'll be heading off to the airport in about 30 minutes. So you help the nurses up there photocopy all the documentation. You notify the family that we've actually got an ETA so that they can drop any last minute items that they might need for the plane and say their goodbyes. You make sure that they've got appropriate access and give them some antiemetics before they head off. And then as QAS arrive, they notify you that they'll need you to come out to the airport as well. So you might act as the nurse escort out to the airport. So you'll pop on out there, you'll hand over to the RFDS nurse, wish the patient safe travels, then pop into the ambulance again and back to the ward for handover before heading home after your shift. So I just wanted to really we are really rural generalists. If you get to come out here, we do such a wide scope within our normal everyday of like different presentations that you might see, whether that's trauma, whether that's medical based, pediatric. It might be those chronic care presentations. It might be the uncontrolled diabetic who walks in with complications. It might be an elderly patient that's had a fall that needs to be admitted to hospital for discharge planning. So you definitely do get to see a wide range of presentations through our hospitals and clinics.
Thanks, Christy. Thanks for that. So we might move to the students now, students who've got experience of being on placement, and we might hear some of their stories about what their expectations were leading into a placement, what the challenges were, and if they would have done anything differently before they got there. So who would like to kick off? Maybe Kate, seeing we've seen your video already, Kate. And if will you just let them know what your what year level you're in, and have you done any other placements other than your RFDS?
Yeah, so I have just finished my last placement, so I'm final year nursing, so I'm completely done now, which is really exciting. But so at UQ, I know it's going to be different with every university, but they'll ask you at the end of second year if you are like willing to go rural in your third year, and you'll get an option if you want to do one semester rural or both semesters rural. And I actually chose just to do one semester rural because I live in Brisbane, so just for convenience, I thought, oh, I'll just do one. So I did go to Toowoomba and spent time in their emergency department and orthopedics, which I don't know why that was considered rural, but somehow it was, which I thought was a bit of a scheme, but anyway. And then I got an email from the uni saying, oh, like, do you want to go rural again next semester? And I think it was probably more so a question of them just wanting to give any placement they can. But I thought, oh, I haven't really gone that rural this semester. So they offered me a 6-week placement in Dalby, which I'm lucky my parents are here, so it was very practical. And yeah, I didn't really know what to expect before coming out to Dalby for 6 weeks. It's a slightly bigger health service. I think they've got 22 beds on their ward. Their emergency might have 12 beds. There's, I think, 2 birthing suites. It's slightly bigger. But I was very shocked when I got my roster for Dalby just to see where they probably send students everywhere for your placement. So I had, I think, a third of my shifts on the ward, which is all the people the people on the ward can be a variety of different reasons. It might be people that are awaiting transfer to PA for cardiac stuff, or it could be people awaiting nursing home placement, or people that have come in with like a range of different conditions. Then I also got to spend some time up in theatre, which I think is an opportunity that you would never get as a nursing student in Brisbane, is to go up and have days in theatre. And I got to see full days of like gynae, where I saw a full hysterectomy. And then I got to see a C-section that day. And then I also had a day of scopes. So it's just that type of stuff that you just don't get to see in Brisbane all in one placement. Then you have days in renal with the dialysis or infusions. You get to go see all the chemo get done. And then you also get to spend quite a bit of time in emergency, which is really good because I think it complements the shifts that you're doing on the ward. I think you really get to see the start of the presentation and then the end. Yeah, so in that 6 weeks, I feel like I saw like literally as much as I could have. And I think they're the type of opportunities that you don't get in Brisbane. And what's really complemented by that is you're with nurses and doctors and allied health professionals and Indigenous health workers that they just want to share as much knowledge with you as they can. And there's none of that competitive nature that you might have witnessed in Brisbane with placements where everyone's trying to be argy-bargy and see the most. It's just a really supportive learning environment where it's like you can ask as many questions as you want. You're never going to look like an idiot. And yeah, if you want to actually take time to learn what you're doing and why you're doing your job, I think you should probably think about going rural.
Thanks, Kate. Does anyone have any questions for Kate? No?
Hello, I'm
Oh.
Zoe.
Hi,
I've got
Zoe.
a question about the RFDS placement you did.
Yeah.
I'm kind of keen on doing that. I'm just at James Cook, and I'm sure it's different for each university. But we sort of have to write like a submission as to like why we'd want to do it. And there's like lots of people that want to do it and they pick. And I was wondering if you have any tips for like how you got to do your placement.
Yeah, so for my university, it was like a statement about why you would want to go rural as an umbrella term. So that they group RFDS placements into rural. So I didn't have to do a statement specifically for RFDS, but they used my rural statement to support that placement opportunity. So I think when you're writing something like that, I think personal experience is always going to help. Like I grew up in a property in Northwest New South Wales, and then my parents have moved around central Queensland, and now we're in Dalby. So I've been really lucky to see rural health services in action. But I think at the end of the day, what's going to get you over the finish line is if you have really good intentions to actually go rural. I think you do see a lot of students that they come out and they kind of take the mickey out of rural placements and think that it's like funny and it's, I don't know if anyone else has experienced that, but I have seen it a bit where they think it's like, it's just something to put on TikTok. Anyway, I think, yeah, if you're going to write an application, you need to think about like, why would RFDS support your learning in your final year of nursing and your future career development? And yeah, why you are genuinely inclined to go and witness something like that.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Kate.
That's right.
Thanks, Kate. We'll go to Casey. Would you like to share your placement experience, Casey? Tell them where you went and yeah, what your experience was.
Hello, everyone. My name's Casey. I am from Inverell area, so like North New South Wales. Used to be in North Queensland. So I am on my last placement at the moment, actually, in Broken Hill, New South Wales. But I did do my last placement. I've done all my placements in Townsville at their big hospital up there. I've done all my like first to third, I think they are. I'm also with CQU, sorry. And yeah, I did all my placements up there. Absolutely loved them. I did cardiac, I did planned procedure unit, which was great. Lots of cardiac monitors, lots of ECGs. Had so much fun up that way. And then me and my partner had just moved to Inverell, and I've done my previous placement to this one in Toowoomba Pediatric Ward on a private hospital, St. Vinny's. Absolutely loved it. My experience there was just great. I think because I have grown up on cattle stations, going to a bit bigger hospital like Toowoomba was just amazing. It just put all the puzzles together for me. So I had I had 4 weeks on pediatric ward, and it was kind of like based alongside the midwifery ward as well, and that's eventually probably the track that I want to go down, you know, with mid and whatnot. So the ladies and gentlemen there were just so beautiful. They really took me under their wing, and I got to see a birth, which was just amazing. I was like, in my element. That was really cool. I met some beautiful people, and I think it was just the initial like you're caring for a family, like, and it could be such a big family, like, you know, you're not just caring for the child, you're caring for their whole family. It may not even be their mother, it may not be their biological mother that's caring for them. So you really had to take into consideration a lot of different cultural aspects as well, which was great to see. And I also, and so the Go Rural scholarship that I had got really helped me with my accommodation. Just took that stress off, you know.
Yeah,
like I was
that's
sorry.
wonderful. We're going to talk about going rural in the next segment. So thanks for that, Casey. Yeah, we've run out of time there. Sorry, we need to get back to the main room. Anna, I didn't get to speak to you. Sorry, do you want to say something quickly about seeing you grew up in a rural area? Why everybody should give it a go?
Sure. So I'll try and be as quick as I can, but I grew up in regional Queensland. I grew up an hour out of Toowoomba, and I've got family in Morven, Roma and Quilpie. And I've had most of my family go all over central Queensland as well, with my two brothers currently with their wives working up in Kowanyama, which is an Aboriginal community up the top of Australia. So hearing their experiences really got me interested in going rural. And obviously being a kid who grew up out west as well, I spent all my school holidays out at Morven, Roma and Quilpie, doing castrating and branding cattle. So that's how I spent my holidays. And I used to hate coming back to Toowoomba because even Toowoomba was too city for me. But I must admit, obviously for me, it's opposite. I went from growing up out west and then moving to Brisbane, and it was a big culture shock for me. There were so many people, yet I never felt more isolated in my life because there just was a massive lack of community. So for kids who are considering going rural and are worried about being isolated, to be honest, if it were me sort of giving an answer to that, I wouldn't say that you're going to be isolated. If anything, they're going to welcome you with open arms. There's always something going on the weekends, and you don't have to bring anything. Like one of my neighbours at my parents' property, he's got a big dam and heaps of like boats and stuff. You rock up there with nothing in your hands and you're welcome with open arms. So I think if you're looking to go rural, it definitely opens up a lot of avenues for you. And I think that you should look at it as an opportunity to sort of get uncomfortable. And being uncomfortable is not a bad thing. The more uncomfortable you are, the quicker you'll learn how to work on your feet. And it'll help you sort of reduce any stresses you have around things that make you nervous in your nursing care. I've done placements only in Toowoomba. I haven't gone any further than that. Next year I'll be going rural. However, I have also worked as an assistant nurse for 6 years now between I've worked in Roma and in Toowoomba as an assistant nurse, as well as in Brisbane. And I'll have to say the people that I looked after in Brisbane, it was quite consistent across the board, and you were kind of just doing the same things day in and day out. Whereas when I'm working in Toowoomba, and especially when I worked at Roma, you would come across cases that were just like so mind-blowing, like you'd never seen things like that before. And then I would come back to my clinical based learning classes through UQ, and I had prior learning that most other students didn't, just because being out west and being in regional and rural communities, they let you take the lead a lot more. Even as an assistant nurse, I was taking and doing things that a registered nurse would be doing because they trained me in it, and gave me certificates in it so that I could do those things. And it's majorly helped me through my nursing career as well, and leading into university as well. So if you are on the fence about doing it, I would say just take the plunge and go and get uncomfortable and actually see how you feel being in another place with people you don't know, and sort of learn to do your nursing care in a community that isn't a massive city where you're used to what your community is. I suppose trying to make it as quick as I can. It's very rough, but
Thank you so much, Anna. That's some great inspirational words to end on.